distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm Neha Tiwari, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this session on behalf of NIIT University. It is so very wonderful to see you all gathered online to witness the virtual launch of an amazing book, Serene Strength by Mr. Arun Kapur, which explores the role of education in the making of a person of substance, tempered with serene strength. Mr. Arun Kapur is an educator in the global spheres of public and private education. He is the founder and chairman of Ritanjali, an NGO which was established in 1995 to catalyze community development among marginalized communities in India. He has previously authored the books Transforming Schools, Empowering Children by Sage Publications in 2007 and Leading Out the True Purpose of Education, Ritanjali in 2011, which focus on his education philosophy of holistic development. During the session, he will be unveiling the nuances of his new book in conversation with Mr. Rajendra Singh Pawar, founder NIIT University. May I now request Mr. Pawar to formally welcome and introduce Mr. Arun Kapur. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Neha. And once again, Arun, a very warm welcome. And of course, a big welcome to all of you who have joined us in our conversation today. Many good friends and admirers of Arun, like I am, many faculty members from the university and students, and many leading lights in the field of education, in the school education. And of course, a lot of our distinguished guests from Bhutan and also from the higher education system in India, and some people from the government as well. So very hearty welcome. So Arun, it's really a privilege for me to be here to launch the book, but also to carry out a little conversation. And let me remind you that your last book, which is here, Leading Out, I had been involved in the launch of that in a bookshop in Delhi, and I recall a good conversation. So this book launch now is your third book. And before I go into the task of introducing you, maybe we should do the first thing first, which is to launch the book. So if you have it, then let's start by launching the book, and we can do the customary activity and action of showing the book cover to everyone who is there. So once again, Arun, very hearty congratulations. And it's great that this very important book is being launched today. And my colleagues at NU, we are all very honored that you made the choice of doing it from NIIT University. So now Arun's introduction, there are many people on this call who will not need, but those who do, I'm going to do it differently. I won't do the whole spiel, because as I go through the questions that I've got, I'm going to also talk about certain things that bring out his personality. But more than anything else, I think Arun's talk will be his introduction, much like his book is his introduction. So he's in his fifth decade in education, 43 years to be precise, during which he has had the opportunity, and I'm sure by his own choice, created the opportunity to work with schools of a very vast range, or school in different categories, should we say. So he's been at Doon, where he spent many years, and then briefly British School before he started Vasant Valley School. All of us know about that in Delhi and parts of the countries, right on top among the Indian schools. He's been on the board of Scindia School, which is my school, and a very active member. He then, soon after he had started Bhutan Valley School, he got involved in setting up Ritanjali, an NGO, which he will talk about, I'm sure, at length, to deal with those sections of society which don't come to these kind of schools, where I find his heart is basically there. and he'll talk about that as we go through it. And then, about a decade ago, his involvement in setting up what promises to be one of the best schools in the world, which is the Royal Academy of Bhutan. And the rest, as I said, as we go through the conversation, we will keep getting a sense of who he is, where all he's been, what he's done, because a lot of the talk today is not just what the book contains, it's the story of the learning journey of Arun. And he talks about learning to learn. So how did he learn to learn, and what all did he learn, and what should we learn? So Arun, I'm going to have a series of questions for you before we open it up to the public. I have received a few questions from the time we did the registration. Some people sent out mail. So I tried to encapsulate some of them in the question that I'm asking, and some more which come then once we've done our conversation. Then we will open it up for people to raise their questions. So the first question that I have is that in 2011, you brought out this real jewel of a book, very thin, 100 pages, which is called Leading Out, where you articulated very many things, but you talked about the 5 areas of development. And then it's been a journey that I think you probably were implementing those ideas as you got involved in this journey at the Royal Academy. And in a sense, this journey from inside out to serene strength. Tell us a bit about even the 5 areas of development, but then essentially this journey, right? Because this is about implementing what you said in the first book. So tell us about this journey in particular, but do start with the essence. Last book.
Thanks, Raji. Before I get into that, but I really want to take this opportunity to start off by thanking you, of course, very, very dear friend of the long standing. And I really want to thank you for creating this opportunity on this. And of course, your team with Neha and Monisha and Puneet, which have worked very hard to put this whole thing together. Thank you, all the team and the university. In many of my colleagues also, Hemant especially, who is in England at the moment, who helped me kind of shape this serene strength in many ways. I also want to take this opportunity, as this is a launch of a book, to thank many people who made this book kind of happen. Of course, I will start with my daughters, Ritika and Angelika, my family, my parents, my sisters, and to His Majesty. As you might have noticed at the forward for both the books, the Serene Strength and Leading Out were written by His Majesty, the King of Bhutan. And he has really been, in many ways, the wind beneath my wings to make this whole thing happen. So this would not have happened without him. All the various people that you talked about, many people where I worked in Tihar jail with the prisoners there, after the tsunami, where Ritinjali worked with looking and thinking of schooling and education beyond the 4 walls of a school. So those are the kind of things that you were talking about that made me happen. And of course, in those 30 years that I was with Vasanwadi School, overlapping the last 4 or 5 years with the Royal Academy and Vasanwadi School, Mr. and Mrs. Puri, Arun Puri and Rekha Puri also were amazing in giving me the kind of space that was required to grow. And that's one of the most important things that we need to look at it. If we are to learn, how do we create that space? And sometimes we find ourselves constrained. And therefore, this whole thing about the making of a person of substance, the role of education and learning, is one of the main things, is how do you create space in this? But before going forward, if you notice, both the books have, the covers are quite amazing. And I want to thank the photographers so the Leading Out is a cover of a little kid grasping the thumbs of the grandfather. This is photograph taken by Raghurai of his son and his father. And they also play, and I really thank him for allowing me to use this. And the Serene Strength, this just such a wonderful, it's getting a mirror image coming across here. This is Akash Das, an amazing photographer whose whose photographs, quite a few of those I possess. And both these photographs are with me. So I wanted to thank all of them too before I kind of get into this whole situation of the journey. So before writing Leading Out, I had written the other one, Transforming Schools, which was really looking, and that's having spent so many years actually being a teacher, um, uh, and then becoming the head of getting involved in setting up of a school. So that Transforming Schools book is a fairly detailed, almost like a handbook to how to run a school. But then almost immediately after writing that, and I realized what was happening. I was traveling to Bhutan. I was traveling various places. Routinely, I was working in Tihar jail. I was working with the coolies at the INA market. I was working with students at Vasanwali school. There was this whole, then we worked in Gujarat after the earthquake, through Routinely, worked outside of Pondicherry after the tsunami. All these things were just, different people from different backgrounds, but all full of potential, right? And that's when I started thinking about what is it, that when I was working with, let's say, just to give a quick short example of the boys from the age of 16 to 21 in Tihar jail, I was working with coolies in the INA market from the similar socio-economic background. I had worked in the Doon school for a long time. I was working in Vasanwali school, and I was seeing what was it common amongst all these people, from different socio. So between the Tihar jail and the coolies in the INA market, there was, shall we say, the people there was one lot who were in conflict with the law, one lot who was not in conflict with the law, but both sets very keen. And what was for me became very important to understand that there was a lot of potential inside. And that's what I talk a lot about. How do you actualize your potential, right? The true purpose of education is that the first book that you talked about. How do you actualize your potential? And that potential is dynamic. It's not static. It keeps going as you grow, as your experiences come along. So the first book, Leading Out, was to put that thought down in many ways, right? That, hey, listen, for you to grow, and that's what you should do. You can't just be static. And that's where my kind of tussle with things like the IQ, the intelligent quotient, which was put across in 1919 and has, not been abandoned till now, where it gives you a number. You take a test, it gives you a number, and that number remains with you forever, right? It's just not correct. Then I had met with Howard Gardner in a couple of the conferences when he talked about the intelligence, the multiple intelligence theory that he came up with, which had, many different intelligences. For me, those kind of conversations, experiences, talking to people, actually seeing them grow up, made me want to put down some of my thoughts. But also a little personal thing. When I was writing my book, we had just come back from Bhutan, my younger daughter, and unfortunately, she got cancer, and she was, not going down the right path. So I wanted to hurry up and give. So this book dedicated to both my daughters, Ritika and Anjalika, through whom I began to see life after they had grown up a little bit. And I wanted to give the first copy of this Leading Out to Anjalika on her birthday, which I managed to do. So that was a book that was looking ahead and behind a little bit, seeing where all I had come. And then this book became the format, the 5 areas of development. I did a lot of talking about this, reading about it. As you can see, the foreword was written by His Majesty. So we were talking in terms of how do we actualize, if you're going to say that the human beings all have actual potential and they need to be actualized, then it was also true that the ideas have a life. And how do you actualize those ideas? And I was fortunate enough that I was given the space by His Majesty to set up the Royal Academy that you mentioned. It's up in Paro. And we actually put into place a whole system based on of learning and growing up for the children and the teachers, based on the 5 areas of development. And while we were doing this, while we were actualizing the potential of the idea, of course, it has grown a lot. We've learned a lot along the way. So we put together a bunch of teachers. We went to a training program, and simultaneously, I was also introducing this into the Vasant Valley School, where we also now function based on the 5 areas of development. And there's a whole system of roadmaps, indicators of success, which allows the children and the teachers to own their learning, because that's the most important aspect that we need to understand. That in most places, the object of learning comes from outside somewhere. Somebody who's sitting in the ministry somewhere, or a body decides what's to be learned, and then it's thrown down. So that's the basic journey, where we started off with leading out, putting out into the world the idea. This idea was picked up by Finland also, 100 when in 2016. And this idea as an innovation has been looked at by Finland 2016, 2017, and they've just announced that they've also picked it up for 2021. So we're one of the few ideas of the 5 areas of development that have been acknowledged. And the actualization of this ideas of the 5 areas is where we read now. So what happens if you go down the journey of the 5 areas and you actualize your potential? Where should you be going? What should be happening? And that's where I started putting down some more thoughts about how do you actualize that potential. And that's what comes through in Serene Strength, where it was very obvious that no matter where you came from, no matter where you were, if you were growing and you're actualizing, it wasn't just good enough to be adequate and cope with stuff. You had to go towards the person of substance. For me, that phrase became very, very important. The making of a person of substance. And in this day and age of disruption and so many different ways of functioning, the importance of having more and more people of substance who think, not just for themselves, but for others, and who are aware of themselves and aware of their own weaknesses. And therefore, so that is the journey from understanding what the true purpose of education was, right? And I put down some ways of doing that, to saying that if you do follow that purpose, that understand that true purpose, then what do you do? And then the role of education and learning in making of a person of substance. And that phrase, serene strength, for me is, again, you got to have strength, and this is coming from so many philosophers. Mahatma Gandhi said this, Nelson Mandela said, in many different ways. But that's the whole thing, that you are, just because you're serene, you're not weak. You still have the strength, but you don't have to kind of show your strength in ways to overpower people. And you need to understand that. So that's where the title Serene Strength comes from. And leading out came from the true meaning of education, to bring out. That was for me what leading out, where the term leading out comes from. It comes from the place that you have to lead out, bring out the best inside you. That's the true purpose of education, to educate, to bring out, to lead out. So I use the word lead out. That means you are involved in leading out what is inside you, not necessarily somebody else, but you need to take ownership of leading out. And then if you do lead it out, where do you arrive? You become a person of substance, and you have this serene strength. And that is the kind of balancing act between these two books. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's
No,
where
sir.
I'm coming from.
I think it does tell us that where you started and where you've reached, but we'll obviously go into a little more depth. But having talked of these two books, now let's step back a little, Arun, and listen to you talking about, as I said, the journey of your 43 years, because you've had a very unusual career. You've been in outstanding schools, as I said, involved directly or indirectly with Doon and Scindia and Vasant Valley, but you also set up your NGO, and then now in the Royal Academy. And I noticed that roughly every 10 years, 1990 was Vasant Valley, and Pallavan was 2000, and Rithinjali in between. And then Royal Academy around 2010. So there is this 10-year itch which is visible if I see as a bit of mathematics. So now we are at 2020. So you have to take us from where you started, and in building institutions, what were you learning and what were you implementing? And essentially, what were the radical ideas, if you have to look at a few radical ideas which came along this path,
Okay.
which would be, of course, of great benefit to all our participants today.
Okay, so we need to go back to the very beginning, as they kind of say. I had, I did my master's in history from St. Stephen's College, which is also how I got into St. Stephen's College. Is a whole story by itself, which we does, work just now. I won't get into it just now, but I got in thanks to Pitru Singh, and there I finished my master's. And if you do history from St. Stephen's College, it's the corollary. You have to sit for the IAS exam. I mean, the civil service exam. I mean, you don't have a choice. So I've taken Barsati, and I was studying for the exams. Written exams had been done. There was a knock on my door, and I opened the door, my Barsati, and there were these two guys. This is an important part of the story. It's a very crazy story, but it's true. And there was Suhas Chakravarti and Dilip Simian who were outside, professors of history, and they sat down and going to rush through this. And Dilip Simian's father was the headmaster of the Doon School at that time, Colonel Eric Simian, amazing man, learned so much from him. But they said, like the history teacher at the Doon School has suddenly resigned and gone in the middle of the term. And Eric Simian rang up his son, Dilip Simian, saying, I need a history teacher now. And for God knows what reason, they thought of me. They came to my Barsati, and I said, hey, listen, teaching is not even on my radar screen. But kicking and screaming, they put me on a 9:30 bus that night to Dehradun, met Gurudayal Singh, amazing man, Eric Simian. And they kind of said, listen, help us out for a couple of months till we find a real teacher. So I was going to be there for 3-4 months. And I stayed for 14 years. Just fell in love with this whole idea of learning together. The point of the story, so they were like the accidental head schoolmaster, and I still see of myself as a history teacher. Wonderful. I love that part of it. But the fellow who resigned and left, because of whom there was a vacancy, right? If he had gone 2 months earlier, there was nothing I would not have had the opportunity, because I would have been too close, written exam. And if he had gone 2 months later, it would be too close to the interviews. This guy, where did he go? He resigned and came to Bhutan. He came as the head of a school in Thimphu, the YHS school. And it is so because of Bhutan that I became a school teacher, because of that vacancy that came at that right point of time. So that's how I started getting into the school. And I just loved Doon School, just an amazing place. I think that if you spend time there and in Sindhya School and in certain of these schools, just by osmosis, you kind of imbibe a lot of learning because of the architecture, the whole theme. Then while I was there, I got a Charles Wallace scholarship, and I pushed off to England for a year, and I was based in Uppingham, and I managed to roam around a bit. Came back to the Doon School, and then I was a housemaster, one of the youngest. For various personal reasons, I wanted to move out of the Doon School, move out of Dehradun. There was an ad in the paper for the British school, principal of the British school. I applied, got it for whatever reason. I was there. It was but I was there for a very, very short time. And then I met Mr. and Mrs. Arun Puri, who were planning to set up Bhutan Valley School, had a conversation with them. And that's how Bhutan Valley School and I got involved, and we started working there. And I spent lots of years learning from the Puris, learning from the students, So therefore, I moved to Delhi, and there for the next 30 years, I was kind of a base. So that's my, many years at Doon School. Then I came here. While I was here at my sideline kind of started, I set up my NGO, which you mentioned, Ritinjali, which is based on the names of my two daughters, Ritika and Anjalika. In Sanskrit, it means helping hands if you say Ritinjali. But if you're a good Punjabi and you say Ritanjali, then it means empty hands. So we have to be very careful of the Punjabi pronunciation of my NGO, right? So but most people in northern India say Ritanjali, so I have to keep telling them, no, it's Ritinjali, which meant helping us. So I've been working with them for a long, long time. And while I was at Bhutan Valley School, I got an opportunity to start working in Tihar jail with the boys from the ages of 16 to 21. And for 9 years, I went there every single day. And I tell you, my whole perception of life completely changed there. I learned so much from the inmates there. I remember one of them saying to me, आप तो हमारे साथ ऐसे व्यवहार कर रहे हैं कि जैसे हम मंदिर के बाहर भजन गाते हुए पकड़े गए. So, that was the kind of relationship I had with them. I learned so much. My whole perception and my whole perspective on life changed with that. And then there was the coolies at the INA market that I had opened a night school with. So I would go very often from Tihar jail to INA market in the morning, having spent time at the Vasanali school. Wow. So the learning was very, very powerful. And I had come from a situation, just to give my parents, who my father came from a family, coal mine owners in what is today Pakistan. My mother came from an academic family. Her father was a maths professor and a principal of the SP College in Srinagar. But through the partition, they went through ups and downs, and through their lives, there were many financial ups and downs. But I never, ever saw them being bitter. So that's one of the things that I learned and imbibed, and that's what I keep talking about in Serene Strength also, that you have to take in, understand your own environment. So there was Tihar jail, there was INA market. My background of growing up with parents who went through up and down but were never bitter, always looked at everything, with a smile. You created your opportunities. Then this Ritinjali, which I founded about 1995. Then I set up something called the Second Chance School, which I really learned again from Ritinjali, which was for kids who had never had a first chance, who had never been to school before. And I knew that there was a lot of stuff happening inside the walls of the school, but because of Tihar and INA, I didn't realize that there was an opportunity to take these kids and give them a second chance in life. But these are 16 and above, and they learn. We put them into internship programs, and they learned a lot. And the Second Chance School kids have grown up to become pretty good in many, many parts of the world. Now, when I was moving from the British school, first I moved from Doon School to this school, Uppingham in England. Then I came back to Doon School, went to British school. Doon School was an all-boys school from grade 6 upwards. British school was a co-educational school from almost 3 years of age onwards. So they were learning the whole thing. I realized that there were completely different areas of the ways of learning. Now I was coming into Vasanali school, and when I was coming into Vasanali school, it was going to be a co-educational day school, which required to understand what happened below the grade 7. And I realized very soon that there needs to be learning to be done. So that's when I set up my preschools before, they're called Pallavan, which are there in, and Pallavan means the growth of a new leaf. It's not a new leaf, it's the growth of a new leaf. And in this Pallavan, these preschools that happened, we started this in 2000, I think. I think it was 2000, your whole 10-year move. Vasanali School was about 1989, 1990, and then 2000. And I remember that at that point in time, talking to you also about this, the phrase I put together was, Aao Seekhna Seekhein. That was the kind of tagline for the Pallavan schools, learning to learn. Now, of course, the learning to learn is a very, well used, but 20 years ago when I first started talking about it, and we realized that that's where it needs to be come down, learning to learn. Aao Seekhna Seekhe. So these preschools went down there. Then I was doing a lot of work with the government school system. As you know, that when you talked, I felt that the rejuvenation of the government school system is the only real way forward. Creating some islands of excellence is great, but the real move forward, and that's why about the Serene Strength or Leading Out is to bring about larger access to thinking schools. And when I went to do some teacher training in rural areas of Kota, I came across a little small town called Jhalawar, and I worked there with the teachers and met the people. And I realized that their aspirations for their children were as high, if not higher, than the aspirations of children in metro cities in schools like Vasanali School. So I've been talking through my Ritinji to everybody saying, do this, do this. And I said, I have to put my own money where my mouth is. So that's when I kind of hopped my house, took a loan, bought some land in Jhalawar, set up a school called Pallavan. It's functioning there. It's a CBSE kindergarten to grade 12 school. My sister Benu basically runs that, and it's doing really, really well. So these are we worked. So while all in these areas where it became very obvious that the school in Jhalawar had to be different from the school, the Doon school, or the Vasanwali school, or the Tihar jail, or so that fundamental thing of contextualizing who you are, right, became more and more crystal clear to me. That's when I was saying, what was the commonality between these various people, and the commonality was the ability, or the way to move forward was to be able to contextualize who you were, how you were growing up. So that contextuality became very important in my understanding. So also for a long time, I was dreaming, I talked to you also about this many, many years ago, about putting together an area, like a school, where we would also have a research center, right? And a teacher training center. And between these two would be a school, right? And when I had written Leading Out and I was talking to His Majesty about it, um, he took that nascent idea and he's just made it into this big, huge thing. He's just an amazing man. And you've met him, and the other people who have not met him, he's young, visionary, he reads a lot, thinks a lot. So then we started thinking together about putting this Royal Academy together, which is made up of these three things, which there's a very serious research center there. There's a teacher development center there. So it took a long time first putting the whole ideology from Leading Out and putting it into paper, the theory, and then the practice of how do you get teachers to understand this. Even when we were introducing it into Vasanwali School, teachers worked very hard, but there was a pushback from the parents. There were many kind of radical ideas of things that were being to implement this. Simple things like collapsing, the whole idea of siloizing the subjects, that you learn your physics separately, and your physics, chemistry, and your biology and your history. But in real life, you have to coalesce all these things and they have to become together. So the non-silo way of learning was one thing that I realized, that, you have to learn your physics and chemistry together and your history and geography, otherwise it doesn't work. So it took some time when I introduced this subject, this way of thinking at Vasanwali School, there was a pushback. So we took it down a few years, and then slowly that group of children grew up with it. So it was there. But at the Royal Academy, we started with that premise. We've moved, and what we started with non-silo has gone now into something that we call cross-pollination, right? That's what it is. You have to cross. No, it's not just physics, chemistry, and biology, but also history and geography, or those subjects or domains or whatever you want to call them. But your ideas, your character, your personality, your 5 areas of development, they need to coalesce. And that is the Serene strength. That is where you're able to bring out the best that you have. So as you can see that from the Doon school to Vasanwali school to Tihar jail to Second Chance school to Jhalawar, we also worked in the slum areas, worked with the fishermen's village school that I set up outside of Pondicherry after the tsunami. I mean, that was such an amazing, and a whole bunch of people who worked with us together. P. Mohan came with me, and a lot of people worked together. And then we, with the Gujarat, one other thing, if you don't mind, when we were working in the Gujarat, after the earthquake in Gujarat, and we were trying to get a school, we had taken on a whole bunch of stuff. There was, I'm sorry, there are some people listening, they might not enjoy or be impressed with what I'm saying, but there was a distinct divide amongst the primary schools in the district where I was working. So there were these schools, and these are little kids schools, tiny little kids, these are primary schools. And there was very distinct curriculum that existed in the World Bank supported schools. And there was a completely distinct curriculum in the supported schools. And never the twains should meet. So the people were saying, no, you can't go here, you can't take teachers from this because they've been trained in a certain manner to deliver the curriculum of the World Bank schools. And on the other side, there were these teachers who were trained in a certain manner to deliver this curriculum, which was designed by the UN body in some ways. And it blew my mind completely. And that's when I started talking about. So these were not teachers, these were just conveyor belts where a curriculum was written somewhere and conveyed down, and they were trained into such a specific way that they could not possibly enter another school. That's what is such a huge realization. And that continues to this date, right? So that is where when I started realizing that, there has to be an ownership. It just can't be such a top-heavy situation. The ownership of making these roadmaps and not what we talk about here. So these various instances, I could talk on this for a long time, but you asked me for contextualization, ownership of the curriculum, both by the student and the teacher and the parent, both involved in creating a pathway or roadmap for them, contextualizing what you're doing, removing the silos, bringing in cross-pollination, not just in subject content, but also in the ways you think your context should make all this. So that's like a quick journey from 1977, which started in Bhutan, which I did not know about at that point of time when Dr. R.D. Singh left Doon School and pushed off to the YHS school here, creating a little vacuum for me to fill in. And here I am back in Bhutan with the Royal Academy, just in there with making sure that the Royal Academy and the school at the Royal Academy, the research center at the Royal Academy, and the teacher development at the Royal Academy are just bubbling. And it is really wonderful to be here with the amazing colleagues that I have. So I'm sorry, Govind rabbled on and on and on, but you asked me.
So I think you did make one interesting point that you've seen that across these places there were common things, but you also had the opportunity to build new things. A lot of freedom. For example, the Pallavan structure was completely your own in a sense, unlike the example that you're giving of Gujarat, where there was a curriculum and so on. Now, most of the people, most teachers, and many of the people who are listening to us today are from good institutions, which have their strength, their method, and therefore their rigidity, and therefore the regulatory system within which they have to work. Now, you obviously had the chance to not be bound. You've broken that mold, and now with the royal decree in the Royal Academy, you can do exactly what you want. But for everybody else who's stuck in their situation, how can they benefit from those ideas? Because you've been in that situation as well. So what are 2, 3, 4 points of advice for people who are in the system to take some of these ideas you're talking about, and how can they be implemented or brought to life?
Okay, very, very interesting. The thing is that first, let me kind of dispel anything that I had this freedom, I had this magic wand that I could do whatever I wanted to. No, Vasanvari School, a very middle road CBSE school. We had to function. We still are a CBSE school. The Royal Academy, yes, so I had a little more freedom, but we still have to follow the exams, the national exams. So it isn't that there was this vacuum in which I was functioning, because and where there was no structure, I created a structure, because sometimes you need a structure, because otherwise there is completely chaos. And I know the chaos theory is something that I read a lot about, but you need a structure. So you're saying that if I find myself, so my question to the audience, if you're saying, would be, who are you? Who you're talking to me? Because nobody is one person, right? So are you talking to me as somebody from the person in the audience as about themselves, a 40-year-old woman who's in some situation? Is he talking as a parent? Because the role that you play, how do you break yourself? How do you break out of any situation that you need to kind of come out of? So that's the first question. Who are you talking as a parent? Are you talking as a student yourself? Are you talking as a individual who needs to work on this? So we have to understand one very important aspect is that the one size fits all solution doesn't exist, right? And what worked for you day before yesterday might not work for you day after. The contextualization point becomes very, very important. So you need to first contextualize who you are, why are you asking this question. Going forward, one of the first things that I kind of talk about if we go into the Serene Strength book is embracing setbacks, right? If you are in a situation where you think that there is something negative happening, whatever that may be, please understand one of the most um, important thing to understand is you have to embrace setbacks. They're always going to be setbacks, big, small, large, whatever it is. And if you're asking that question, how do I break out of this? So obviously, whatever you're in, you're not happy with. Otherwise, why would you want to break out of it? So if you're not happy with it, understand. You need to re-examine the purpose of education, right? What are you trying to strive? The answer is going to be within you, right? And the answer that we are going forward more and more and more is this being able to bring almost everything that we have into what I just call cross-pollination, right? You bring whatever you're learning. So like I learned a lot from my parents, right? From their setbacks and their way forward, and seeing that they were never bitter about it and they were always helping me in making. So that is part of me. So look back. If you're stuck in some place and you want to move forward, you have it already within you. You just need to find it. And in the book, somewhere I have written about the fact that, very often we try and look for solutions outside of ourselves. We want to go and meet a guru, we want to read a book, want to listen to some panel discussion. I said first, and this is again nothing new that I'm saying. This has been said for centuries. And this is something that I heard first from my dadi, from my grandmother, who should sing a song in my sing Dhundan kithe javana pehla mere andar vasta. Where do I go looking for this person, this solution? It's inside me, it lives inside me. So that's my advice to anybody who wants. The question that you also kind of posed in such a way that there were some revolutionary ideas. I'm nothing. None of my way forward is revolutionary or different, or they're just common sense solutions of. My idea is to simplify things. I think somewhere along the line, education, higher education, many PhDs have had to complicate things to create space for themselves. So my job has been in those terms, trying to remove these kind of crazy, very, very prescribed solutions and say, hey, let's get back to the basics. So that's, we need to simplify where we are, just get into understand. And the one of the things that in the 5 areas of development, we talk about making a roadmap. I feel very strongly about things called skills, processes, and watermarks, right? You need to learn skills. There's no question about it. So if your whole education is based on content, and then the content becomes obsolete, you become obsolete. And that's why 20 years ago, I came up with the skill of learning to learn. So if you haven't learned to learn, then you're already in trouble. So you have to learn. You have to understand the process of not only learning, but whatever's going on. And once you understand the process, things become, you're in it. The process is where you need to understand. And our schooling education, our schooling system, unfortunately, at the moment, keeps us away from the process. It keeps us very finely attuned in the content. And that's why I also talk a lot about the differentiation between schooling and education. They're not the same thing. Unfortunately, in a lot of conversations, the two are interchangeable. Schooling is a very small subset of education, right? And this is a phrase that I've heard and I've used and I've understood, that the whole world over, we've become an over-schooled and undereducated society. And I think we need to reverse that very clearly. We need to bring education into us and bring out the best from inside us. And this question that you're saying, that the members in the audience who are entrenched and comfortable and what are the ideas? Simplify, understand your skills, processes, and watermarks. So what is watermarks? Watermarks are, everybody knows, is that indelible stuff that authenticates something or the other. So learn to authenticate yourself, whoever you truly know, because you will know who you are. And then you will know what is it that you want to improve or not improve. You will be able to identify your strengths. Use your strengths to shore up your weaknesses, because you're going to have weaknesses. And there is nobody who does not have strengths. But what those strengths are they dynamic? Are they static? Are they hidden behind? So that's my answer to people who are asking this question. Inculcate this if you're doing this for your child. Get her to understand, learn skills, learn processes, right? learn watermarks, honesty, diligence, resilience, compassion. There's so many. How do you teach compassion? I don't know. Right? This is for you to find out how you create an environment in which compassion is a given. So this is again another phrase that I'm going to use that, and again, not a new phrase at all. Any chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Nothing new about this. Everybody knows about it. So in your composition as an individual, and I want to bring this another aspect very, very strongly, is that somehow the other schooling has taken us to be too concentrated on ourselves. The community has taken a backseat. I think education going forward has to be more community based. What is it that you're doing to become a contributory, constructive citizen of your community? And if the education is not helping you become that, then you're not getting educated, right? So if the other thing that I use quite often is that when you want to grow into for your child, you need to understand for them this whole thing of metamorphosis from a caterpillar to a butterfly, again, a very thing that I talk a lot about. For the caterpillar to come out of that little cocoon is a very painful journey. And scientifically, biologists, botanists, people have seen this. It's a very painful journey. It's not easy at all. And they've also tried experiments of trying using tweezers to make it easier, remove it, and get the butterfly to come out. But then what happens is that if the struggle is not there, the pushing and pulling of the veins inside the butterfly wings, the blood does not reach the tips of the wing. It's in the struggle that the strength is formed. And those butterflies, which have been helped to come out of the cocoon, don't last very long. While the ones who go through the struggle, right, and painful, when they come out, my God, how radiant are they? How beautiful are they? And that is when they bring pleasure, not only to themselves, but they bring pleasures to people who look at them and see them. And they're such a huge part of nature in pollination and that cross-pollination that I talk about. So that's my kind of response to your question to people in the audience as to what should I do? Just be you. Listen to the guru inside you. There's a guru inside you. And as Dr. Dinesh Singh, who used to be the vice, he says, follow your drum. Everybody has a drum beat, right? So that's, again, I think that's where I want to stop.
If students have a curriculum which is packed with math, physics, science, and so on, and schools have to manage to put the kid through the curriculum, where do you think we should be introducing the time to help students to find out their inner guru, is the term you use? You do talk of introspection. You talk of community, of working with the farmers in the neighborhood of the Royal Kingdom. So when I was talking about rigidity, you have to create time for children to look at themselves, or teachers to work with them. You have to give them time to go and work in the community. So that's the rigidity I was talking of. At least that's one physical rigidity.
So quick response to that. That rigidity actually wastes a lot of your time, right? If you're learning your maths and physics and chemistry in isolation, right? So those are, and your history and your geography, if you collapse them, you can learn them much better and you have time left over, right? So it is that what I learn in physics, I need to first learn in maths somewhere. If I learn them together, I understand both of them together. If I learn physics and chemistry and biology and history and geography, I learn them all together. I learn them much better, freeing up time when I was learning them in isolation.
So in other words, you are proposing that the timetabling of so many sessions of maths to be done and so many of chemistry to be done, you are basically saying that the school has to find a different way to do it, so that you can merge them, first of all, the siloization, and the second is then create time to do the other, the buildings of the other capacities that you talk of. So therefore that freedom has to be brought in by school leaders. So if I'm a teacher, I may not, if I'm a teacher and I can't change my timetable, then how do I do it?
So therefore, it's a bottom up and a top down situation. What we need to understand that this is a lot of this, and again, people are not going to be happy with what I'm saying. This is being done for administrative ease. So if you are going to create a timetable which requires to balance all these things, it's a nightmare. But as in Vasan Valley School and in the Royal Academy and in Palawan, we all understand the job of the administrator is to administer and create methods to make the life of the teacher easier and better. But unfortunately, the administration is done to make administrators easier. And that has to be put on his head. So a lot of the rules and regulations that you find in many schools are all, siloized because it's easy to make a timetable. Otherwise, it's a nightmare to make a timetable. But if you once get it right, and that's the job, that's what you're talking in terms of. For me, when we are, the question that we should also be asking is, what are we preparing our children for? What's the school for? Is it only there to, get the high marks? Then you have to concentrate on getting the, timetable done so you get done. But if you're actually looking at education, you have to go there. An example that I give in my book very clearly is climate change. If you want people to understand climate change, you can't do this through geography. You have to understand history, geography, physics, chemistry, economics, and then you begin to get a sense of what climate change is all about. But if it has been siloized, you don't get an understanding of it. So my answer to you is, where's the time for it? It's there. Your design needs to bring that time out. And design requires much more effort from the administrators and the school leadership. The principals will be easier to talk about. They get stymied by the administrator. We can't do this because of this. We can't do this, right? So that becomes, and that's why just quick example of when I was running a school for the NDMC in Delhi, where we, for little kids, Ritinjali was running that school. A lot of the things, the teachers were enthusiastic about doing this, that, and the other. Taking the kids to the zoo was a big deal not because the teachers had a problem, because we had to get permission from somebody, some bureaucrat to get a bus. So getting the bus was the problem, not taking the kids to the zoo, right? So it was such a nightmare to get the bus. And forget it, we're not going to the zoo. Not because they found that there was no use to go to the zoo, but it was so that is the administration side that I'm saying to you. That if you get that corrected, the time is there, and your mindset is there.
So so I think that's an important point. That top down, bottom up, which means the heads of schools have to listen to teachers who want to make changes, and they have to get the teachers to collaborate so they can add subjects together and do projects. So that part is okay. Now talk a bit about we use the phrase inner guru quite a bit in this book.
Yeah.
And it's, for Indians, this is a normal kind of thought that, God is within and all of that stuff. But to a little child, how do you get them started to look for the inner guru? What should they should be doing something else. Obviously, you're not teaching them. Just much like you talk about the second chance school, children go on a trek and they learn about so many things, not because you told them learn about collaboration, learn about something. So this inner guru thing, give an example. And similarly, I think about the community, working with the communities in Bhutan, the agricultural community. You talk a lot about agricultural entrepreneurs. So give one or two examples of what they are doing, not listening to in class, which one is the inner guru thing, and the second is, and here I am folding in some of the questions which are coming to me so that the flow remains. So this inner guru question, and then living with community, because I do know in Bhutan Valley School, where one of my youngest child was, they're going to Yamunotri and walking down to Yamuna and Delhi, and in 10 days, looking at what we have done to that over the history and why we have done it, has had more impact in understanding many things like environment or whatever. So on inner guru and community, what are the equivalent methods or pedagogies or whatever you want to call it, which you're introducing here in talking about serene strength? Talk a bit about that.
Okay, so the thing is that even going back to, let's say, Palawan 20 years ago, when we started talking about the preschool, if you want to do that. So one of the things that we used to do with Renukal and other teachers over there, before the kids went home, or let's say on the weekend, we would sit down with the, and these were like 2-year-old, 3-year-old kids, I think they were 2.5 to 3-year-old kids. They all have a pre-knowledge. That's what the mistake that we make is that we presume that at that age they have lots. So we used to ask them this simple question: what do you want to learn the next week? Right? So that became a very powerful kind of, and then the fair amount of teachers who were also there were not quite comfortable with this, 2.5. But the kind of things that came out, the sense of ownership that came out. So what was it that what did you want to learn? And the moment we gave importance to what the child wanted, the child started looking for more things inside. And then more and more exciting things started coming up. So that's a kind of win. Just how this whole thing started also many, many years ago. I spent about 2 weeks with called militants in Tripura. They were people who had surrendered to the army over there. And I spent those 2 weeks asking them, they were all adults, what do you want your kids to learn? That was the other way I went around it. Right? And the answers that were given were just incredible, very powerful. That curriculum that came out of there, that was a parent-driven one. And I'm giving you an example of just asking the kids, what do you want to learn? So you get it from the parents and then what you put these things together is much more powerful than any curriculum coming out of any examination center, board, whatever it is. Because it's coming from inside. This is your inner guru. What do you want to learn? And the more you respect their wishes, the more trust that when they see that they say something which will not be ridiculed, but will be taken seriously, and that becomes part of the learning program of the next week, and so on, they will come out with. So that's just one. I mean, there are many, many such examples. You asked me for one concrete example, is to give them that space to be able to say, to bring out what there is inside them. And as they grow older, 8, 9, 10 years of age, you get them to make a roadmap, right? What do you want to learn? You actually put it down. First is a verbal situation and you take it forward. And then you ask them the next situation, what would be your indicator of success that you have actually learned this? They will set down their indicators of success. That if in 3 weeks I've read 2 books, or even 2 months I've increased the speed of my running this, if I've understood. So just last night, this is actually just come to my head. I had some of the kids from the Royal Academy come over, and some of them, we were having dinner. And this is a child in grade 11 he was just exciting and bursting to tell me something. And he said, we finally learned calculus. And moment I understood calculus, you have no idea how it has freed up my understanding of physics. Right? So there is this whole situation when you're saying, how do we give them the inner guru? Is that give them space, listen to them. Because if they say something and you shut them down, they're never going to say them. And they will not listen to themselves, the inner guru. But if they have space to listen to it, if they have put down and they have ownership of their learning path, right, they will discover that, yes, inside them is a inner guru, which makes them curious, which gives them an oversight going forward. So now that is one of the things about the inner guru. Now let's come to the community part that you.
But one question on that. See, you have to. You talk about creating a space in the day, and you talk about the early morning time when they come in, they have to be with themselves to figure this out. And in our school, in Scindia School, we used to have something at sunset called Asta Chalbir. For 10 minutes, nobody speaks. Everybody just sat and saw the setting sun, and that inculcated a kind of a conversation, introspection. So you have to then fix it particularly for younger children. You have to fix it as a habit to do that. So therefore, would that again be a timetabling, or do you expect children to do it on their own?
No. So therefore, what happens is that so again, let's take Scindia School or like the Royal Academy. What we have is called Nindro in the morning, and we have it for 20 minutes where the kids sit down by themselves. So if it's raining only, then otherwise they go outside, sit somewhere, and just spend time with their minds. And there's no instructions given to them. Right? You have to learn to live with yourself. Sitting alone by yourself with no cell phone, nothing in your hand, just with your thoughts is not easy. But if you do it over and over and over again, it becomes a habit. So I think there are a lot of people who went to Sindhya school don't need now that timing, but it's become intrinsic in that they need to be on their own for a while. Now, where as you become an adult, where you find that time is now your situation. If you still need a timetable, then that's who you are. But the
But you set
fact
timetable, right? There's a
that's
rigidity.
your timetable. Huh?
No,
But
no,
there
I'm
are
saying
lots of
in the beginning, while you are forming this habit, while you are getting people to get to realize that even this can happen. So I like to talk of it as the appointment with yourself, right?
right?
But in junior classes, you're saying in your school as well, you're saying in the morning they have this 20 minutes. So it's fitting into their lives and they have to do it. Not forced to do it, it's created as a spot. Now, they may do what they want with it, but you're wanting them to be alone wherever they are. So
That's
this is an important requirement then,
this is
in
an
a sense.
important requirement to learn to be with yourself. Otherwise, how do you find your inner group? If there is no silence and your whole thought process is completely drowned out by whether it's a teacher or a friend or a radio or something, you need time to be with yourself and then confront yourself. And that's as you grow older, that is what I talk a lot about of that contextualization and the, the cross pollination. When you have to first understand what is your strength. So you've got into this habit of finding and having your inner guru talking to you. That is like in everything else. Like you spend so much time potty training a child. And I find it's now what happens is that they don't potty train children at a young age. Now they let them wear diapers till they're 3 and 4 years old. So things have changed now. There was a whole different ball, how they're bringing up children. Everything has changed, right? So simple as that. How do you get them to understand that, there are certain time and place and the right place to do the right kind of things? Simple as potty training.
So therefore, even an existing school, and one of the points we can make is fine, nothing stops a very well-run, well-oiled school for the principal to institutionalize this 10 or 15 minutes as the first class in a day or some such thing, even if that was the idea to do. And
Nothing
you would
stops.
that strongly.
I'm saying nothing stops the head of the school to do anything as long as she or he knows why she's doing it, right? And if she knows why she's doing it and what she's going to get out of it, right? She's going to be able to, or he's going to be able to convince the layer above, the management board, whatever it is, and then we'll be able to convince the teachers and then talk to the parents and the students. So first you have to understand not the what and the how, but the most important question: why? Why do you want them to understand your inner guru? So once you understand that, then you will find in your context, right? How to then once you have got the why, then the how and what you'll find in your context. How you do it in one, so it cannot be prescriptive because then it kills it. How one school does it in their own place. It's a day school, it's a co-education school, it's a residential school, it's a residential co-education school, it's a school in a village with just 2 huts. It can happen anyway. It depends on, and that time told what I'm saying to you, that how you design to use the time. Unfortunately, the kind of the format that is coming handed over from school to school from 100, so this is a situation that I said if somebody came from 200 years ago and suddenly came onto this earth, they would find the whole thing completely different. But if she was a school teacher and walked into a school, she would see just cosmetic changes. In the way of learning, nothing has changed in the last 100 or 150 years. That is what we need to talk about. So
And
quickly
then about
come back to community.
community.
That's a very important question that I want to kind of address and just explain to you in 2-3 minutes what we do here. One is the agriculture part, but also what happens is when we started the grade 7, we're going home for the first time at the Royal Academy, and I was meeting them and saying bye. And I said, when you go home for the winter break, when you come back, because here the academic year is January to December, so they were going and they were going to come back in the next back. I said, you got to bring me 7 gifts. So there was this shock side. What do you mean? The head of the school is asking for 7 gifts. And I said, no, you have to give me 7 gifts. And I asked him, when you come back, I want you to bring me 1 song. Get me a story from your grandmother. Get me a recipe. get me a dance, get me a game, get me a local design. So, and because we have kids from every single district in Bhutan, the 20 districts, we now in the last 3-4 years have a compilation of gift recipes from all over Bhutan, and they become part of our curriculum. Every Sunday, the kids from a certain district cook for the whole rest of the school that together. The games there are so many games, local games other people did not know. Those have become part of our curriculum. Songs that they bring, there are different dialects that they bring. So these 7 gifts have now become part of our curriculum. So that's one part of the community. So the whole community, and they're quite excited, the kind of stuff that they bring, and they share it with everybody else. And the teachers use it because if you have, best way to get somebody to learn something is to tell stories, give anecdotes, give examples. And then now you have a huge collection of stories and songs and dances and from all over Bhutan, which the teachers can use to get things across. So that is one part of the community side. The other part, what you talked about, is this whole agriculture situation. So we are at 10,000 feet in what was a thick forest. We have now arrived here. And it was very clear and very obvious and very meaningful for us to be part of the community. We didn't want to be resented by the community. We needed to if I want our kids to grow up to become a phrase that I use very often, a constructive, contributory citizen of your community, you cannot do that in the isolation of a little school, walled-in school. You need to actually get out into the community, right? So we talk to commend so what we do through the year, so let's say the kids will go out in the beginning, get the fields ready for rice, then they will plant the rice and go back and look after the rice, and at the end go and harvest the rice. And then we buy that rice from the farmers and consume it in the kitchen. So the kids have been through, whether it's potatoes or whatever it is, they understand so much about, let's say, geography, economics, right? The culture of this whole situation. They learn hard work, how hard it is to transplant rice, how hard it is to actually cultivate all this. So all that comes into it. There's no way you can learn this inside a classroom. And then they come back appreciating all the work that has been done to help them become what they are, right? So that is why it is so important, because if otherwise, like a friend of mine once told me that it's like giving you a book and a textbook and saying, now you go learn how to sail. How can you learn how to sail from a textbook, right? So that is why this important part of this. And also the community sees these kids, right, as part of their community. And what was very important was and that was there in the beginning, it's disappeared now, when it was said as if let's go out and help the community with the thing. I said, nothing doing, because that is putting a completely different mindset into the minds of these little kids. Who are they to go and help the community? They're going to learn. That is the mindset with which you do anything. Changes the outcome of whatever it is that you do. So these kids had gone into the community to help them with the harvesting, to help them with the planting. It would have been such a disaster as far as I was concerned. It's the mindset that they went in there to learn, that they were not resented by the community. And they actually saw the members of the community now with a huge amount of respect, because they know how much work has to be done to just create or produce that. So those are the things about both the inner guru and the community that you kind of asked me. I hope I kind of covered what you were.
Yeah, we even at the university in Nimran, we have slotted time for community connect where students go. But the first thing they've been doing is to go into the village schools and teach. And I think this observation that they thought they were going to teach, but without exception, when they come back at the end of the term and you have reflection sessions, they will say that they learned so much. So I think that practical experience gave them a view. In this case, it gave them a view of what it means to be in a village. Many hadn't seen a village. Or the notion that people have that poor people are sad. They found so much more happiness in these poor people. And of course, the how they view life and so on and so forth. And of course, if we are building young people to become leaders, they have to lead other people. So knowing the other people is an important part. So a couple of questions I'm clubbing together, given the COVID, given the online, given technology, and so many questions around that. But I also have noticed that the biggest chapter in your book, 140 pages, 26 pages, almost a fourth, fifth, is on technology. And I'll first make a comment that as I read through it, it looked to me like your journey of learning technology has been captured in this chapter. But rather than that journey, and given the situation of today, what are your views and what's the advice we would have for educationists who are struggling with this issue today? Lessons we can draw in this forced period of change. I see this COVID as a forced period of change to learn. What should they learn about technology? What are 2 or 3 or 4 lessons that you have
Okay,
learned?
fine. So the fact, one very important thing is technology is here. Let's not ignore it and let's not pretend that it's not going to be here. Acknowledge acknowledge its strength, right? But at the same time, acknowledge the fact that you should use technology and not let technology use you. So my idea of understanding this is through the word of AI, which everybody calls artificial intelligence, right? And everybody in the world knows that. But that's a dikkat for me with that is that what you expect from AI, and I'm saying the way I would like, because just cutting short, and then we are running a little bit out of time. I can talk about this. Is that with technology we should use it, we should outsource some of the stuff for it to do, but not outsource it in such a way that it dumbs us down. The problem with technology is that we are saying, okay, now the machines can do it. They can calculate much better. They can analyze much better. A machine can diagnose, analyze medical reports and come up with a better theory. Nobody's denying that. But what my way of looking at it is that if you take that same word AI and say artificial intelligence and say that no, use the machines in such a way that what analysis that they do, and it should come back to us. So then the result of technology should augment my intelligence. So AI for me stands for augmented intelligence, that it needs to augment who I am. So the machines should not dumb me down. It should actually enable me to go to a completely different level of thinking. And as many people say that at this point in time, humans don't even use maybe 10 to 15% of their brain power. So my understanding of this is use technology to augment our intelligence, augment how we use our brains. So rather than outsource it and become dumb, let them use technology to push us and raise our bar. So that's one understanding of me that I have. So there's a lot of stuff in technology that is administratively stupid not to use, right? Lots of stuff that needs to happen, right? But also what is happening is that technology, on one thing that we are all sitting here, this fact that I'm in Bhutan, you're in Gurgaon, there are various people from technology is enabling this to happen. Fantastic. So let's not pretend that technology is not bringing in. But we also need to be very careful that technology also drives a wedge between us and nature. And it is this isolation of the human beings from nature that I fear is going to cause more and more problems. If you look back, it is this alienation from nature, or not, maybe I'm using the word alienation, but the sense of superiority that human beings have over nature that have caused most of the destruction and the ill that we are facing today. It's the mindset of the human that towards nature that has caused this problem. And technology, if you're not careful, can drive this wedge much farther. So therefore, we need to be proactive about it and use technology to bring us closer to nature. How we use technology is what it's of importance, not how technology uses us. I have written an article because this is very big for me. How do we use technology to bridge human beings and nature together? And it's fairly easy, fairly good. I'm not going to go into it just now, but that is a very important thing that's going. So next step in technology, as far as education is concerned, is that this little school in Jhalawar that we talked about was the first school in India to issue block certificates to their grade 12 graduates. So that is also going forward, that we have to use technology of this nature that stays with the students for their life. So therefore, education that stays with them and they can keep building on it. And the use of technology to be negative about somebody else, unfortunately, this happens quite often. Falsification of marks and this, that, and the other. So we, in this small little town in Jhalawar in Rajasthan, now other schools are getting into the picture and issuing block certs, right? The other thing about technology is that I'm zipping through. I could talk, as you saw, the largest chapter in
26 pages, yes.
my
Lot
right?
of how-tos, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we talk about. The other thing which aesthetics is very, very big in. The other thing which I quick want to talk a little bit about, just bring it in right now, is something called the Bhutan Baccalaureate. Okay, this is the
So
formalization
there was
of.
a question. There was a question from Professor Isuran. He said that, so you've covered many things in life, Mr. Kapur. So what's the next step? He was. Uh, so what are the if there are unaddressed issues? And I wanted to say that also as my last question, but I have one or two more after this. Then we'll conclude. That every 10 years you got a new itch. So we talked of 1990, 2010, 20. Now, what is this 10 years?
So I'll save that for the moment here at the Royal Academy without getting into Bhutan Baccalaureate. Very important for us. There are two things most crucial on which everything, my 5 areas are built. One is technology, just the rock bottom, all the assessments and the analysis, all these things are done on, it's very easy now. You don't need very expensive solutions to this. You just need bright young minds. And, at the Royal Academy, we do have bright young minds who are, who create these systems. So sitting on top of technology is something called aesthetics. Now, aesthetics is not just the study of painting. For me, it's a mindset. Do you have an aesthetic mindset? What do I mean by that? I mean by that, do you see whatever you see, do you see the good in that? It's very easy to see the ugliness in everything, in human being, other people whom you don't like, building. But if you like the Astachal in their school or the Nindro here, we have to create a habit forming mindset, right? The mindset for us is aesthetics, which we encourage everybody to see the good in everything that they see. Technology comes there together to help them do that by bringing the nature together. And with the aesthetics and technology, what also it allows us to do, because in schooling, what we lose completely is our peripheral vision. We are so focused in learning physics and chemistry and mathematics and all that. But the cross-pollination that happens on the side, the peripheral learning that happens, that gets lost out. So it's very important that we, while focused, we are able to get into the peripheral vision. And from the peripheral vision, we bring that in. And technology and aesthetics, when they grow hand in hand, do this very, very easily. Again, I'm not going to go, but this is something that, anybody in the situation, how you contextualize it. If you combine aesthetics and you combine technology, and you understand that we must not allow technology to alienate us from nature, you have no idea how beautiful it is. And I say this because I've actually experienced it, learned it from my colleagues, learned it from my students. And the other thing we need to also, when I keep talking about community, just want to bring in this other factor, that this is something that His Majesty says a lot. The whole point of what is it, what is education, or the whole idea of bringing up children, is the point of creation of a just and harmonious society. That's his big kind of mantra. So if what you're doing is not going towards creating a just and harmonious society, then this is a waste of time. And this is the same kind of country which many years ago came up with gross national happiness. So I think this is a move forward from there also. That yes, there's a gross national happiness. The question is, whatever the government does, is it contributing to the happiness of the people? Right? That was something that the last king came up with. Now, the present king is saying that yes, that is, you take up from there, move forward, that everything that we do needs to go to create a just and harmonious society. To create a just and harmonious society, you have to use technology, you have to use aesthetics, and you have to use your peripheral knowledge and understanding. These things all coalesce again. And how you do it, contextualize it to yourself. And I refuse to believe that if you understand the why of it, whoever you are, if you're the leader of a school, you're on the management of a school, you're an individual. This is education. That's why I'm saying talking about it outside of schooling. Education actually happens mostly outside of education, outside of schooling. Do this, understand this, that are you moving towards becoming a member of the just, creating a just and harmonious society, right? Technology will help you do that. Aesthetics will help you do that. So these things are necessary to get in, say, and then this whole idea of augmenting your intelligence, I'm just repeating that again, is very, very important in this whole huge chapter on technology. All these are coalesced why I'm saying, powered by technology, you can do so much more. There have been so many instances of so many societies flourishing without technology hundreds of years ago. Right? So can you imagine how much better and more evolved we should become if we follow the AI, that my sentence is augmented intelligence rather than. So I don't know whether you saw that movie on the Go game that the computer beat this Go. And did you see that movie? Very powerful movie. At the end, the machine builds beats the human being, and everybody's very sad. I said, look, this computer, this software now has been packed up into a laptop and gone home. The only thing it can do is play Go. While that South Korean gentleman who lost, but he can carry on now being so many other things. So that is what we need to also understand, that though there will be a way. So I don't know if the audience has seen this movie or not. They should see it, but they should see it with this lens, that this intelligence, this was learned, the game Go most difficult. At the end, what happens to it? Packed into its laptop and locked away, while the human Go player can flourish in so many ways. Can be a great father, can be a great, this gentleman, husband, son, brother, citizen, community. So that's where my thing is. Aesthetics, technology, if they go hand in hand, they can take you to places just where the mind doesn't usually go. People might recognize that little line from somewhere.
So now, before we talk of the last question, which is your next decade, and you touching on the baccalaureate, so I just want to merge a couple of questions I have, comments and questions. So Dr. Mrs. Manke from the University of Presence, she says, you talked about educating children, but how do we transform teachers in large enough numbers? And a hint from Mamta Saikia from Bharati Foundation. He said they're doing their big convocation conference, and whether people from the Royal Academy at one end and Jhalawar School can come and participate and present their paper. So both are to do with how do we prepare teachers at scale. Any suggestions?
Of course, what we've been talking about last, technology. We are at the moment, right as we speak on Monday, we are doing this workshop with government schools teachers from each of the 20 districts of Bhutan, right? So it's not 5,000 at the moment, but we're planning, we can do that once we have the technology and so we are doing that online. In this day of pandemic, you can't travel, right? So what has happened is, like His Majesty says, never waste a good pandemic. So he has used this, and we are also saying this whole situation that we are looking at. How do we transform, in those terms, schooling into more towards education? And yes, we are doing this right now, and we're doing it at scale. We use our teachers who reach out to many diverse, but we first get them to understand themselves. in their own role before we talk to them as their role of a teacher. Because you need to understand yourself first. And then, because otherwise it's again that same narrow kind of focus that you have. You need to understand what we've been talking about and what you talked about the audience. I wanted to say that um, very clearly is that you need to understand yourself first. How are you transforming yourself before you think that you can go into a classroom? That's one of the things that I also, and this is again something 30 years ago when I was asked about Vasan Valley School, what's different between, what's so great about what you're setting up? So I said, in Vasan Valley School, we don't teach. So he said, what do you mean you don't teach? The fact of the matter is you don't teach. Because if I go into a classroom and I teach for 2 hours and nobody learns anything, what's the point? I've had a great time teaching. So the job of the adult in the classroom is to help children to learn. And that will only happen if the adult is in a learning mode herself first. If you're not in the learning mode yourself, there is no way that you can go inside and help to get students to learn. So in Vasan Valley School, in many other places, we got students actually to take reversal. So one was technology again. When technology was coming in, the students knew much more about technology than the teachers did. So we got the students to take classes and get the teachers to reverse role and learn about technology from the students. And immediately what happened was the students understood how difficult it was to get people to learn something new. And the teachers understood also how difficult it was to learn something new. So this role reversal of students and teachers and students is also a very important aspect going forward. So to the lady from, we are happy to do that. We teachers are also involved in this whole work that we're doing with teachers across Bhutan online. We're getting them to understand this. And our teachers have to create roadmaps. It's not just students who have to create roadmaps. They have to show how are they growing, how are they better today than they were 3 months ago and last year. If they're not growing in whatever areas, so we had teachers again, a geography teacher who's a great Bharatanatyam dancer. So we sent her, we paid for her to go and train. So that this professional development part, which restricts a maths teacher only to go for maths classes or courses, is again putting blinkers on them. So if you become the best that you can be, then only can you help children become the best that they can be. For me, that is constantly raising the bar of who you are. And we can help that. We're very happy to do that.
So I guess at the university, we have had the Center of Educational Technology, which now we are thinking of renaming it a Center of Learning. And perhaps through this medium, the work that is going on, we could try and reach it through large number of interested teachers. Perhaps that could be one method. So finally now, the last question is on the itch, which starts in 2020. You talked about the next thing you want to do, and then we will close. Unless you want to read any part, any sentence or any part. I did want you to open page 106, if you can, Arun. This is on Serene strength.
I hope everybody is noticing how prescriptive he is. That I can read from 106.
First paragraph, last sentence.
106. Which one are you talking about?
First paragraph, last sentence. So we could say that.
So we could say that serene strength is a state when a person is able to meet challenges in a calm and untroubled manner, trusting their inner guru to guide them. That is, in a sense, you picked up. Well done, Raji. That this is kind of brings it into the essence of the book many ways. I'll just read it again one more time. So we can say that serene strength is a state when a person is able to meet challenges, because there will always be challenges, in a calm and untroubled manner, trusting their inner guru to guide them. So that is, in a sense, what the role of learning and education is in the making of a person of substance. And how do you recognize a person of substance? Is you can almost feel the serenity that exists in their actions and their thoughts and their words. Man, thank you for getting me to read that. That was nice.
Okay, now the last question, which is the next 10-year itch.
Uh,
You talked
okay,
about
so like I said, my first book was on empowering schools, not empowering children, empowering schools. Then I went on to look at how it was going. I wrote leading out, putting down my ideas of the 5 areas of development, why it is so important, that the holistic. Another thing about holistic for me is a big dikkat is the way we all spell it. HOLIST, holistic. So for me, HOLI means a hole in the ground. Why don't we spell it holistic the way it is WHO? ये holistic आया कहाँ से मुझे नहीं समझ आता कि ये HO जहाँ the way you write holistic is you're saying it's a hole in the ground that you're going to disappear into it. So first, if you're talking about the whole bringing coalescing thing, let's get the spelling correct. So holistic education has to be spelled WHO, not HOLI. So that's point number one that I understood and I went forward. And what from the leading out to the great opportunity given to me and my team through His Majesty and his involvement and taking that whole little bit of understanding to a whole new dimension. And I wish more people will be able to come and visit us here at the Royal Academy. It's at 10,000 feet on the outskirts of Paro, where the airport is. Beautiful forest, and you build very traditional buildings using modern technology. And it's great. So now what we are doing here is that through the research center and the teacher development center, the next phase is to take out this whole 5 areas of development, wrap it around what we're calling the Bhutan Baccalaureate. And everybody says Bhutan Baccalaureate, it's not just a baccalaureate for Bhutan. It's a baccalaureate from Bhutan. And therefore, Bhutan, as you know, is so specially placed, is first of all, it's the only carbon negative country in the whole world. This it manages to do being surrounded by China and India on either side, who are doing their best to pollute this place. And this continues to be a carbon negative. It's politically stable. It's environmentally beautiful. So and the thoughts that are emerging from the leadership of this whole thing about a just and harmonious society, from a gross national happiness, this whole mindset is so beautifully already setting the trend for it to take all these ideas into the world. And the 5 areas of development, the way we are designing the Bhutan Baccalaureate is, first of all, it can be a board agnostic way of understanding. So if you're a CBSE school, continue to be a CBSE school. We'll bring the Bhutan Baccalaureate, what I call as a warm blanket, and surround you to help the children grow up in all the 5 areas of development. And your schooling can continue to be in that academic sphere to get your high marks. And we are quite sure, and this is what happened with the school at the Royal Academy, when the first batch of kids sat for the first board examination last year in December. The results were phenomenal. The academic results, the board exams, the results that everybody else did. So the time that you're talking about, how do we do this? We did it. We went and planted potatoes and harvested rice, went for treks all over the place, learned all these, and learned the skill of taking an exam. It's a skill. So a lot of people feel that I've taught you physics, and now you've learned physics that includes the taking of a physics exam. So our understanding is quite different. We have to help you learn all these concepts together, and as a separate skill, help you learn how to take a CBSE physics exam, an IB physics exam, an A-level physics exam, contextualize it. So don't waste your whole time teaching to a test, while you just need very short amount of time to learn how to do well. So that is what we are hoping to do. We have now taken it to a certain level inside the Royal Academy, the school at the Royal Academy. And hopefully now we roll it out into schools in Bhutan, outside of Bhutan. That's an opportunity again. We are very happy to talk about. And so these whole skills, processes, and watermarks, our roadmaps are very important aspect that we talk about. These give you a mindset to help holistically WHO into And then we also have a program here called Truth, Beauty, and Values. I'm not going to get into this, but these are the kind of things that you do. These are the peripheral growth areas which are available to us. And we lose sight of them because we become too focused. And these peripheral ideas are constantly flowing past us. And we just need to stop, listen to our inner guru, and let the peripheral become the focus occasionally, and the focus become peripheral occasionally. That's what I hope I will be able to do that. One of the things that we're talking a lot about here, and before we close on this, and I want something that you and I talked about maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago, I've forgotten this also, and which is very important part of my book, is the fact about internship. How do you learn while in an educational environment? How do you actually learn real life? And I'm now going to reverse the role that you have stayed. I'm going to ask you to share with us something that GNIIT, I think it was 30 years, just correct me, was it 30, 40 years ago? I've forgotten how it was. A long time ago.
91.
So just tell us in few words, because I think that's very, very important, which needs to find again space in the education system. And I think there is a huge reference to it in the new education policy. And this is something that you talked about, whatever. And if you take 2 minutes while I quickly have a sip of water.
Well, we're coming to the end of this. So I did read a lot. Your chapter on internship is an eye-opener to many people, that it talks about how you marry these. We were talking about time, organizing the time which is in the curriculum. And I think by pushing students out of the classroom into a work situation, it's been done before, but we had done it in 1991, where we said, you're doing a college degree, you do 4 semesters of NIT, and then for a whole year, one full year, we organized for them to be working in a company right from 1991. And during that time, which became an integral part of the 4 years, 3 years of degree, concurrent 4 semesters, and 1 year. And then you also talk in your book about that should also help them to earn. So our formula was that we told the companies that these 12 months, pay them X thousand per month, which was half the salary they would get, but it would pay off for the full fee that they had paid. So building models which were, I think, self-reliant, self-sufficient, win-win-win multiple times, but bringing in that practical experience for a whole full year, so that when students had done their 4 years, they had a college degree, they had 4 semesters of learning, and they had 1 year of work experience even before they started work. So I think you're trying to now bring that into every possible subject, is what I hear, and right from school time. So that's great. So with that, I know there are some more questions. We'll try and reach them to you, Arun, because we have run out of time. And good news is that the number of people who were there at the peak are pretty much still there. So thanks everybody for being there. And some questions that we couldn't answer, we will try to reach them to Arun. I captured many of them and tried to rework them into simpler combinations. So with that, and with a request to everybody, not a request, a strong recommendation that you should buy this book. I want to say it because I think it's a very important thing for people to read. I consider this work seminal. I don't know if I can use that word. It's seminal because you've simplified things to a point where it's possible for every teacher to recognize what are they really trying to do, and then how to try and find their way to make sure that education happens. And we will take it, I think, from the university side and the Center of Learning. We will draw in your institution, and you said His Excellency wants to talk about how university should work. The Center of Learning, to see whether we can beam this out, like we're doing this little book launch, to any and every teacher and any and every principal who's interested. We would be considering that a very important part of the university's responsibility to take this knowledge and spread it to teachers, because, like Dr. Manki just asked us, how do we teach the teachers who will then teach the students? So that's important. So with that, Neha, back over to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kapur. Thank you, Mr. Pawar, for such a thought-provoking discussion. It was indeed an enlightening session. I extend My hearty vote of thanks to Mr. Arun Kapur and Mr. Rajendra Singh Sar for such a wonderful and intriguing discussion. I must thank the entire coordination team for every kind of support extended to make this event successful. I want to thank all of you for making time to be here. With this, we come to the end of this exciting event. Thank you all. Have a wonderful time ahead. Stay healthy